Good news for the U.S. economy. It added more jobs than expected for the month. I'm Phillip Yin here in D.C. Good Friday evening to you in America, and good morning to all our friends in Asia that are watching. We'll talk about global food prices again. They're edging away from the record highs set in March, but it's not time to celebrate quite yet. Plus, the state of U.S.-China trade will have expert insight into a complicated but fruitful relationship. First, jobs. U.S. President Biden is celebrating the country's strong labor market. He says it's a sign that the White House is helping rebuild the middle class.
We have now nearly doubled what we're almost at 10 million jobs. Almost at 10 million jobs since I took office. That's the fastest job growth in history. Today, we also matched the lowest unemployment rate in America in the last 50 years, 3.5%. Yes, 3.5%.
The U.S. added more than 500,000 jobs in the month of July. It was much higher than expected. It's a victory for the White House following 2 consecutive quarters of negative growth, which had fueled fears of a recession. Benji Heyer reports.
The U.S. economy has slowed this year, but the jobs market in 2022 remains buoyant. 528,000 new jobs in July alone in leisure, hospitality, business and healthcare. That's up from June and means the country's now added 22 million jobs since April 2020. Amid near-record levels of inflation and following America's biggest interest rate rise in almost 3 decades, this is welcome news for an administration which has struggled to defend its economic record and, by its own admission, predicted far lower numbers for this month.
We are in and the president, including the president, has been saying that we're in a transition to a stable and steady growth. And during that transition, what you'll see is instead of that record high breaking job numbers that we've been seeing every month in the realm of 500,000 to 600,000 jobs on average per month, we're expecting to be closer to 150,000 jobs per month.
Despite the strong jobs data, many economists argue the US isn't quite there yet, though Friday's report, the results of which Joe Biden claims are due to his economic plan, may quell suggestions of a recession. And this could help too, a breakthrough, finally, on the president's climate, health and tax bill worth hundreds of billions of dollars to kickstart the economy.
So my message to Congress is this.
Kyrsten Sinema, the centrist Democrat senator whose opposition remained a major hurdle to passing the legislation, threw her weight behind it overnight, a move hailed by the president.
And with the investment in this bill, we are going to supercharge that recovery, make sure that the manufacturing, innovation and jobs that come from this bill are made in America.
The deal paves the way for the first vote on the package in the Senate as soon as Saturday, and its final approval would mean more creation in the coming months. Benji Heyer, CGTN, Washington, D.C.
And with that, let's check in on how the U.S. markets responded to that jobs report, and that means John Terrett at the NYSE.
Investors were really thrown a loop on Friday when that jobs report came out for the month of July. It was double what had been anticipated at 528,000 new jobs, or jobs that were restored after we lost them because of COVID in about 2020. Investors didn't really know which way to turn, and there's 2 ways of looking at it. Well, yes, it's good that people are getting employed, but it means that the central bank, the Federal Reserve, is likely to be just as aggressive as they have been going forward, raising interest rates into a possible recession, as raising interest rates is their only tool to try and calm inflation. At the end of the Friday session, though, we had mixed markets. The Dow was ahead by 0.25%, but down for the week. The Nasdaq was down by 0.5% on the day, but up for the 3rd week in a row, and pretty much the same for the S&P 500. Bitcoin stood at the end of the Friday session at 22,900. In the week to come, Nasdaq, which is the mainly technology market over in Times Square, will require all its members to show the diversity of their boards. We get earnings from Coinbase Global, the Walt Disney Company, and Rivian, the EV maker. And on Friday, ET celebrates the 40th anniversary of that famous Steven Spielberg movie by becoming an IMAX movie. John Terrett, CGTN, on the trading floor of the New York Stock Exchange.
For more, we welcome back our good friend Nicholas Economides, who is always helpful in explaining the whys to all of this. Professor at the Stern School of Business, NYU. Good to see you, sir. I am so confused. I talked to one so-called expert, and basically the question goes something like this. Well, wait, the Fed's trying to slow everything down, but it looks like the economy's heating up. This is strange, isn't it?
Well, I think what we need is both the Fed increasing interest rates and the federal government showing fiscal restraint. Instead, as you reported a minute ago, the federal government is planning to spend hundreds of billions of dollars now, with the potential picking them up from taxation over 10 years. So that's quite the wrong move. I think it's going to sustain inflation, and we're going to be seeing inflation for some time in the future. And the market already anticipates that the Fed is going to keep increasing interest rates in an aggressive way, and that's why the stocks went down today.
Right. Now, clearly, the White House is not taking your advice, and Congress is not watching this show at this very second, or certainly not taking your advice because they are going to spend more money. But I'll be devil's advocate here. Oil prices are down significantly from where they were on the highs. Food prices are dropping. I mean, I know rent still is moving higher, but the housing market's also slowing. We do have significant data points that show that inflation, at least, is much more in control today than it was 2 months ago, correct?
I wouldn't say so. I think we haven't seen the end of inflation at all. Now, the oil market is a very specialized market, which was hit hard by sanctions and created a big reallocation in which the Russian oil is no more imported in Western Europe and the United States, but it flows to China and so on. And the United States buys more from Saudi Arabia. So this the sanctions created a significant disruption in the oil market, which is going away. So that's kind of one market that is doing better for the average consumer in the United States. But there are many other markets, and which are driven by demand-driven inflation, in which people have too much money in their pockets and they go and bid the prices up. And that's not going to change. It's not going to get eliminated, especially given the good unemployment report that we saw today. So this push from the demand side is going to remain. And we don't see any significant effort from the administration to increase supply. So with kind of supply kind of stuck and demand increasing, we will keep seeing inflation for some time.
And if there continues to be inflation and the Fed keeps raising rates, I suppose if that's the data point that we use, how high could the Fed go, or how high does the Fed need to go to actually tamper down what you say is on both on the demand and perhaps supply side as well?
I think it's going to be hard to predict. I think the Fed is going to go every month and raise by half a point, sometimes 3/4 of a point, and see how the economy is doing. When the economy starts showing very significant signs of recession, the Fed will stop. It's all a guessing game also from the point of view of the Fed, because their information is not perfect and it comes to them with delay. But that's what I think. I think it's all up to the Fed. They're going to keep going as long as there is significant inflation and no recession. When recession signs show up, they're going to reverse.
Okay, so the bulls on Wall Street and perhaps even the White House might very much disagree with this conversation right here, and they would say something like, why can't we bring down inflation yet still have a very strong economy that creates good-paying jobs for Americans, and at the same time have a healthy relationship with trade around the world? Why can't they have it all?
Well, that's a good question. You know, when we have started a significant inflationary spiral, it's very hard to bring it down to zero. And the Fed will try very hard, but as I mentioned before, the federal government keeps spending money and wants to win in the next election. So they will keep doing that. They will not stop. So there are two opposite forces going on here in the American economy. On the one hand, the big fiscal expansion, and on the other hand, the interest rate increasing of the Fed. So they're going in opposite directions, and we have to really see how much and how fast the American economy is going to slow down. And that's kind of the crucial question, and nobody really knows the answer to that, I'm afraid.
And obviously, there's also impact to the rest of the world as well. We are out of time, but Professor, it is always good to see you. Have a great weekend, and thank you for helping us better understand this very complicated situation.
Thank you very much. I know it's complicated. Thank you.
The U.S. presidential election is more than 2 years away, but some potential Republican candidates are already making their case, and they spoke earlier. The former President Trump is set to speak at the Conservative Political Action Conference on Saturday. Dan Williams has this.
Attendees at the latest Conservative Political Action Conference, or CPAC, are getting the chance this week to see for themselves some of the Republican candidates posturing for possible presidential runs in 2024. The focus for Texas Senator Ted Cruz was on US President Joe Biden, while Democrats maintain they have a chance of keeping control of Congress in this November's midterm elections. Cruz predicted Biden's policies are laying the groundwork for a Republican blowout.
We are going to see in November not just a red wave, but a tsunami sweeping this country.
Cruz ended his speech by calling on the audience to continue believing they can win.
You are the courageous heroes fighting for liberty in our country, and I'm here to tell you, together, we are going to restore that shining city on a hill that is the United States of America. Thank you, and God bless you.
Another speaker who has been linked with a possible presidential run, Florida Senator Rick Scott. He spoke about his 11-point plan that he says will rescue America. In it, he says he would better fund the police and punish criminals, get every child in every U.S. school to stand for the national anthem, and distance relations with China.
Nations have borders. We're going to secure a border, build the damn wall, and when we finish it, we're going to name it after President Donald J. Trump.
Donald Trump will himself take center stage at CPAC on Saturday evening. And although the former US president has yet to confirm he is running again for the Republican presidential nomination, it would appear many of the attendees here are hopeful that he will.
It's exciting that he might be another, be on the ticket again. But really, there's a lot of up-and-coming Republicans as well that I think, him coupled with any of them, I think would be a really strong outcome.
I'm kind of excited that Trump might be running again. He's done a lot, showing his 4 years being president.
For now, the speakers appear focused on the midterm elections. But once those are over, expect the race for the White House in 2024 to truly begin. Dan Williams, CGTN, Dallas.
Next up on the show, the latest on the conflict in Ukraine, plus a new outbreak of COVID cases in China.
3 ships from Ukrainian ports now on their way to the United Kingdom, Ireland and Turkey respectively as part of this deal that was signed by Russia and Ukraine and that was brokered by Turkey and the United Nations. All of these ships, like the very first one that had departed the port of Odessa as part of this deal, they all now have to move through Turkish waters, and that's where the cargo will be checked as part of this deal, because Ukraine is only allowed to export grain, fertilizer and food. And in the other direction, because there will be empty ships coming into the Black Sea toward Ukrainian ports to pick up grain, well, they will be checked by Turkish authorities and other signatories to this deal, whether there are weapons shipments on board, which of course is not allowed as part of this deal, quite logically, of course. Now, what we'll be seeing here is also that all of these ships will be escorted by Ukrainian ships. Why? Because these are mined waters. These are very dangerous waters in the Black Sea. And the hope is that there will be a lot of movement over the next few weeks and months, because there is so much grain right now stored in silos and in Ukrainian ports. Around 20 million tons of it is believed to be there. It has to be got rid of so that the new harvest can reach those silos and those ports on the Black Sea. This is crucial, of course, especially for countries who need this grain as quickly as possible. So what we're looking at right now is 4 cargo vessels have left Ukrainian ports altogether. The very first one still on its way right now to Lebanon. Philip Crowther with the Associated Press for CGTN in Lviv, Ukraine.
Russian President Putin and Turkey's President Erdogan met in Sochi to discuss a potential special military operation in Syria. As Stuart Smith reports, Ankara is pushing for a 30-kilometer security zone.
Ahead of the meeting, President Erdogan suggested a new chapter of Russian-Turkish relations was on the horizon. Despite major disagreements on some areas of foreign policy, including what Russia calls its special military operation in Ukraine, collaboration has also been a defining factor of their relationship. While Moscow courts Ankara for permission to build potent Bayraktar drones on home soil, Turkey needs Russia's help to build a nuclear power station, and Russia continues to rely on Turkey to help it export gas to Europe, with Russia's 3 other pipelines to the west at least partially out of commission. President Erdogan was instrumental in arranging a UN-Russia-Ukraine deal that now sees grain shipments from Ukraine's south coast moving again, a deal President Putin praised on Friday. And Ankara has been trying to use that momentum to secure a ceasefire, although there's been no movement on that for the past few months, and little appetite for it shown by either Kiev or Moscow. Meanwhile, after a 9-year prison sentence was handed down to American basketball player Brittany Griner, the Kremlin has confirmed discussions with the US about a possible prisoner exchange are still ongoing, but insists it must take place through private channels, not with what it called megaphone diplomacy. For now, though, Griner is staying put at the Moscow region jail, where she's been detained since February, while her lawyers launch an appeal. Stuart Smith, CGTN, Moscow.
On to news of the pandemic. China's popular beach destination of Sanya is ramping up COVID measures. The resort city in Hainan province is the latest hotspot with 200 confirmed cases on Friday. Health authorities say the flare-up is driven by the latest Omicron strain, and parts of the island are now under lockdown, which is stranding many tourists. Here in the U.S., monkeypox spreads and is spreading more and more. 7,000 cases so far. The White House has declared the outbreak a public health emergency, but as Jim Smellman reports, officials trying to stop the virus are running into big challenges.
With monkeypox spreading quickly in the United States, the Biden administration is scrambling to address the crisis. Earlier this week, the White House named a coordinator to oversee the federal response, and on Thursday, monkeypox was officially declared a public health emergency.
And it's a very important signal to the community that all hands are on deck now with regard to monkeypox, that everybody understands that this is a very high priority.
The declaration frees up funding and staff for testing, treatment, and vaccines. So far, more than 600,000 vaccine doses have been distributed around the United States, but the White House estimates there are 1.6 million people who are at high risk and should be vaccinated. It will likely be months before that many doses are available. Monkeypox vaccination centers like this one in Washington, D.C. have been opening up, but lines are often long, and sometimes there simply aren't enough doses for everyone who wants one. The U.S. Food and Drug Administration is working on a method of getting 5 doses out of a current single-dose vial of vaccine, hoping that will help meet demand in the short term.
To try and see if we can actually stretch out the number of doses we have by dilutional techniques, either by giving a lower dose with the same effect or administering a dose by a different route of administration.
Monkeypox spreads primarily through skin-to-skin contact. So far, the outbreak in the U.S. has most impacted men who have sex with other men. The Biden administration says it is focusing outreach efforts on the LGBTQI+ community while trying to not stigmatize that community.
I would say the community right now is pretty scared, unnerved. A lot of my friends are really, they're remaining celibate right now. They've decided to take an act of celibacy in order to avoid it.
So far, there have been no deaths associated with monkeypox in the U.S., but the White House expects cases to rise.
Obviously, we want to expand testing. We're going to see those numbers go up some, but we want to get this, and we are getting this under control. I want to remind people nobody has died of this yet. Obviously, we want to keep that level of serious illness as low as possible.
Jim Spellman, CGTN, Washington.
Next up on the big show, global food prices fall again, but don't celebrate just yet.
We are CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Welcome back. The United Nations Food Agency reports that global food prices fell sharply in July, but they're still up from last year. The Food and Agriculture Organization Food Price Index tracks the most traded global food commodities. Overall prices down 8.6%. That is the 4th straight month of drops. That was led by double-digit falls in the price of vegetable oils and cereals, but food prices are still 13% higher than last year. Joining me to talk about food prices and how they're affecting the world's consumers is John Quelch, Dean of the Herbert Business School at the University of Miami. Good to see you, sir, and thank you for joining us. You know, we're perplexed by all this because, of course, we've been reporting on the price of food that's gone up, and now we've recently gotten a little bit of good news, and I don't know, I feel nervous to even celebrate. How should we feel?
I think we should feel pretty good, Phil. Obviously, the supply chain disruptions caused tremendous uncertainty in the food commodity markets, and that drove up the spot prices and the futures prices over the last year. And now, particularly with the deal that you spoke of earlier that affects the shipments out of Ukraine, there's some optimism in the market that will certainly, in terms of grain and cereal prices, modify the high levels of price increase that we've seen. So I think folks in emerging economies can take a little bit of comfort from the latest results, but still, as you pointed out, year on year, they represent a very, very significant and onerous level of inflation for people who are at or close to or under the poverty line.
Is it possible that food prices are just going to be higher across the board for everybody because it does cost more to ship goods, it does cost more to fertilize the fields, and quite frankly, there's probably less and less farmers every year because margins are getting squeezed, so they produce less stuff, which increases the price. This might be just a trend that we've seen for the last 10 years. Is that possible?
I think if you look back over the last 30 years, Phil, you'll see a tremendous improvement in global productivity in agriculture. There has been tremendous genetic science that has been brought to bear in improving yields. And, that is reflected in the fact that over the period of globalization, if you like, tremendous number of people were lifted out of abject poverty around the world. But recent events of the last year have driven, by some estimates, 25 to 50 million people back into poverty. Now, one of the problems that is not usually pointed out is that as Western consumers decide that they want to be more healthy, more nutrition conscious, they shift to farm to table type produce. And the waste that occurs when you are shipping produce, and you know it from looking in your own refrigerator, that there's always something that you forgot to eat that's now past its sell-by date, even though you refrigerated it, and you've got to dispose of it. So curiously enough, the shift to eating more fresh produce puts more burden on supply chains and actually results in more food waste.
I'm just going to say there are things in the refrigerator that are probably different colors than they were when I first bought them, and I think that's probably a sign. But you bring up a very good point. In a research report that I read, nearly 30 to 35% of food of Americans goes to waste. And it's not just Americans, because a UN report or a global report shows that almost a third of global food supply goes to waste, and they highlight exactly what you said, which is transportation. And that's why I would push back and say, wait a minute, it's not the world doesn't have enough food, it's we're not doing a good enough job of getting the food from point A to B in an efficient way.
Right. So there are two elements here. One is the predictability of the crop size that needs to be harvested. So obviously with climate change, uncertainty, and weather variances, the size of the crop this year may be different from last year. You may need more or less labor to harvest it, and you may need more or fewer trucks or rail cars to transport it. A second key issue, as you point out, is the distribution itself. And in many emerging economies, quite frankly, the transportation infrastructure is just not sufficiently well developed to efficiently transport produce from its source to cities that might be several hundred miles away. The length of time that takes is burdensome, and as a result, the produce will deteriorate en route. Or if the roads are badly taken care of, and you're shipping in glass containers, half the glass jars may be broken by the time it arrives. So distribution issues, often overlooked, are central, but also uncertain production crop sizes are also partly in this equation.
John, we agree. And with that, thank you very much. It's always good to see you, my friend, and thank you for making us feel guilty about the food that we waste in our refrigerator.
Okay. Phil, please clear out that refrigerator this weekend, okay?
All right, always good to see him. Germany is not immune, as well to the rise of food costs, and that's leading to changes in the way that people live. There's a sharp rise in visits to food banks, and Natalie Carney reports from a local one in Munich.
There was a time when retiree Rosemary's basic pension was enough for her to get by. Not anymore.
I don't get much money, that's why I come here. Everything has become more expensive.
Sertap lost her job during COVID-19, and with a big family to feed, she had nowhere else to turn.
Nowadays, there's no money, but everything is very expensive. And when you have a big family, it's very difficult.
Young, old, German, Ukrainian. The demographics of those turning to food banks across Germany are changing. According to organizers, more people registered at this food bank in Munich over the last 6 months than have over the past 2 years.
People who used to be on the other side donating and helping us are now coming and asking for help. And we have lots of families now. It's just not possible for a normal family just to get along.
With basic food prices up 15%, COVID-19 job losses, Ukrainian refugees, and surging energy costs, all of Germany's 962 food banks are seeing longer queues.
Inflationary prices are also having an effect on the donations that food banks across the country are receiving. Supermarkets and individuals simply have less to give away, forcing many people to change their habits to make what they do have last all that bit longer.
I am using foods longer, especially past the expiration date, because it is still well preserved.
Often we have to choose cheaper items or brands. It may be chicken, it could be fish, because they're more affordable for us.
The German government has waived a surcharge on electricity, radically discounted public transport tickets, and provided one-off payments to each income taxpayer, all to the tune of over $30 billion. But some economists are calling for more immediately effective and long-lasting measures.
It cannot be stressed enough that we have a dramatic social crisis that is likely to worsen in the coming months. The current relief packages do not sufficiently protect people with low incomes, and it should be clever in the sense that financial transfers, giving people money, is a much better measure than making certain things cheaper.
Economists are also warning of permanently high prices for energy and food in the coming years, worrying many social aid providers.
I really need food because we're just trying from Friday to Friday to get enough for everybody.
So too are recipients.
There are noodles, tomatoes, bananas, tomato sauce, chocolate biscuits, small coffee, and yogurt for about 14 days or 3 weeks.
While more and more people find themselves rationing what they have, the economic conditions that have brought many to this point are far from over. Natalie Carney, CGTN, Munich, Germany.
Meanwhile, record summer temperatures are drying up Germany's rivers, and that's directly affecting inland shipping routes, which power plants and heavy industries rely on. From Berlin, here's Trent Murray.
Well, facing a shortage of gas supplies from Russia, Germany is increasingly turning to coal to help boost power generation and prepare the country for possible energy shortages over the winter. But now a new challenge is emerging, with high temperatures and a lack of rain causing difficulties in the way coal is delivered to key power plants. The Rhine River is one of the main routes for coal to get into the country, with barges travelling along the 1,300-kilometre stretch of water, which snakes all the way from Switzerland to the North Sea. But low water levels are now making it hard for fully loaded barges to traverse the river. In fact, the situation has become so serious, 2 of Germany's main coal power plants have warned they may have to cut capacity because they can't get enough supplies delivered. Staudinger 5, which sits east of Frankfurt, and Datteln in North Rhine-Westphalia account for almost 5% of the country's coal power generation between them. With Europe's hot, dry summer causing river levels to fall, the power industry says the long-term outlook remains uncertain. The Rhine is critical for getting fuel supplies from major seaports in Amsterdam, Rotterdam and Antwerp down into the industrial heartland of Western Germany. But barges using the river are now having to sail only partially loaded, fueling demand for the largest vessels and pushing up transport costs overall. All at a time when wholesale electricity prices are already at record highs. It's not just Germany feeling the heat. France also relies on the Rhine to help cool several of its nuclear power plants. Recent warm weather has pushed up water temperatures, meaning several of those plants have now had to reduce capacity. It's yet another challenge for Europe's energy infrastructure as it tries to adapt to the hot weather now, while at the same time prepare for the cold weather in coming months. Trent Murray, CGTN, Berlin.
Next up, expert insight into the trade relationship between the U.S. and China.
Images may appear to be identical, but looks can be deceiving. The difference is not always obvious. It has to be discovered. There are always different sides to a story. We put the focus on the details. To see more, to understand better. CGTN. See the difference.
Welcome back. The U.S. trade deficit narrowed in June to its lowest level since December of 21. The gap shrank by more than 6% to under $80 billion thanks to a record increase in U.S. exports. Exports rose on more shipments of energy and food, while imports dipped due to the sharp drop in U.S. purchases of cars and food. But the trade deficit with China widened during that same period. It rose 17% to nearly $37 billion. For more on this complicated situation, I spoke to William Lee, chief economist at the Milken Institute.
Well, it tells us what can really happen if we really work at forging a deal that defines 21st century trade between China and the U.S. The U.S. is clearly a huge partner for China. It imports a lot of stuff from China. And that's why even though overall imports have crashed a bit, the imports from China have really continued to surge. On the other hand, all the exports that China was supposed to bring into China, export from U.S., really hasn't happened yet. That as a result of all sorts of COVID shutdowns and logistical snafus, our exports to China have not kept up with the expectations that came out of the first couple of trade deals that was done pre-COVID. So I think it shows that there's a lot of potential here, and we really have to work hard at getting this trade relationship right, because China and the U.S. are truly the largest countries in the world. We get this right, everybody else falls along with us.
We have the issue of tariffs. I know the White House has been talking to China about it, and there was some talk in the past couple of weeks of potentially reducing or cutting some of the tariffs. Do you have any more updated information as to if that's still going to move forward?
All of this talk about tariff cutting, especially if it's to lower inflation, is just a bunch of nonsense. The amount of tariff impact on inflation is not even measurable. But truly, I think the tariff situation was put on because it wanted to incentivize China to come to the table to forge this 21st century trade deal. The trade ambassador Tai has consistently said, I really need this tariff leverage to get the discussions going. Now, I think it's in the interest of both countries to get the discussions going. So with or without tariffs, that's the real imperative there.
Yeah, there was some talk about the holiday season. I know we're bumping up against back to school season, but we're already thinking about the holiday season. There's been concerns about the supply chains, partially because of the lockdown, but partially because of the uncertainty in demand as well. Where do we stand, I should say, regarding supply chains towards the end of this year?
Well, Phil, as you know, when kids go back to school, they got to have stuff. And most of the stuff these kids get are really coming from China, whether it's pencils or notebooks or, even and the latest laptops. So it's pretty clear that the surge in demand is going to be there with this opening to school. But the issue is, can we lower the prices a bit and make the budgets of these already strapped families stretch a little further? And easing tariffs on a lot of these items would help a lot.
You know what gets me is, we talk about the tension between the U.S. and China all the time, right? And it's not just us. Other media organizations talk about it. We talk about Trump and the tariffs, and everyone does their verbal assault on each other. But I was looking at statistics, and I'm sure you know this. Trade between the two countries is basically nearly at an all-time high for the most part, if you look at the charts. So despite all the talk, we today trade almost as much as we've ever traded with each other. Why is there this disconnect?
It really comes down to geopolitics again. I think, given our druthers and given the market forces, that these two economies would be so interlinked because the trade between China and U.S. stretches down from agricultural produce and low-level industrial products to the highest level, value-added AI, computer technology, facial recognition software. All of these advanced features are part of the Chinese-U.S. trade. So clearly, as our economies grow, we will be more and more dependent on each other. And shame on us if we start to separate, have different non-integrable systems that we can't connect together, because that would not only be bad for the two countries, U.S. and China, but it would be bad for the rest of the world.
Yeah, but I mean that's my point, though. Why aren't the governments talking about it? Why don't the analysts talk about it? Well, why don't the mainstream media talk about this real positive aspect of the relationship?
From a U.S. perspective, looking at China, it seems like President Xi is much more focused on establishing his credentials as the man who's going to be the third term, the guy who's going to be in the same league as Mao Zedong and Deng Xiaoping. So I think President Xi is really focused on his domestic issues right now. Here in the United States, President Biden is trying to feel his way into geopolitics because he feels that Trump has removed us from that arena. So I think that the distractions from the U.S.-China trade have been so dominant in the last year or so, especially on top of COVID. These high-priority items have just fallen by the wayside, and that's the shame.
I know this next story will appeal to many of you because tea has traditionally been traded around the world from China. But this tea, the trendy tea-based drinks, are catching consumers' attention. B-Ron has this.
Having been drinking tea for more than 2,000 years, Chinese people are now embracing new styles of this traditional beverage. From bubble tea, cheese foam tea, and lemon tea to coffee chai, the market is booming with multiple chain brands springing up across the country.
This store has launched a new type of green tea that combines traditional Chinese tea making skills and new flavors. I like green tea, so we came here to try their new product.
New tea trends started to take off before the COVID-19 pandemic. From 2015 to 2021, the country's annual compound growth rate of per capita urban disposable income increased by 7.2%. The number for the food and beverage sector was 5.3%. The pandemic encouraged innovation in the industry because customers were looking for new experiences to spice up their social life. Consumers have shown less interest in similar drinks. That's also why the new style tea has started to lead the consumption trend. During the pandemic, people are more price sensitive, so the teachings have to take into consideration of the product variety and the local market feedback. To keep up with customer demands, brands are working hard to come up with innovative products and offer online sales to boost their market.
Our recent bestseller is a new tea drink co-branded with a famous TV drama. Customers just pour in to try that. Seasonal fresh fruit tea like peach tea and plum tea are all-time favorites.
Innovation remains critical for this niche market. The lifting of COVID restrictions has also had a major role in spurring consumption.
Chinese consumers, particularly young Chinese consumers, have always been looking for new innovative products. I think there's no place in the world which has as many SKUs, as many flavors, as many variances. I think many of the brands, I think they face a situation that there's a bit of a supply and demand mismatch, which we're talking about right now, which I think makes it very competitive. At the same time, we also see a strong uplift in omni-channel as well as delivery activities.
The new style tea market expected to reach 117 billion yuan by 2022, which is roughly $17 billion, and grow to $50 billion by 2025. Biran, CGTN, Beijing.
Next up, we're focusing on Latin America. New economic measures in Cuba to try to help struggling people.
Images may appear to be identical, but looks can be deceiving. The difference is not always obvious. It has to be discovered. always different sides to a story. We put the focus on the details. To see more, to understand better. CGTN. See the difference.
Cuba has adopted a package of new economic measures. Over the past couple of years, Cubans have faced food and medicine shortages, blackouts, and other hardships. Luis Chirino reports from Havana.
JR Soluciones is a new Cuban private business with 27 employees. It fixes cooling and electric equipment for companies and homes. Owner Jose Luis Acosta told me how some of the new government economic measures affect his business.
The possibility to access foreign investment is one of the beneficial measures. It's an opportunity to contribute to the country's economy and our company's financial and business development.
The Cuban parliament recently approved 75 economic measures, among them allowing foreign investment in the private sector, setting up an official currency exchange market, and extending assistance to vulnerable population sectors. Local economists say the moves create a pathway to lead Cubans towards recovery.
I think that two of the most important measures are allowing joint ventures between private and state-run companies and the introduction of foreign capital in the private sector.
Everleni said setting up an official currency market will have a big impact on the population.
This will obviously help the Cuban economy. The hard currency brought by the banks will provide the people with stronger purchasing power in Cuban pesos.
Easing customs restrictions on non-commercial imports by individuals is also welcomed by many.
Now the people who travel can bring more goods for their families, which the state markets have no capacity to guarantee at the moment.
Jose Luis Acosta, a private company owner, says the new initiatives will help the country's economic development.
Cuban experts agree that we are exponentially pushing the country's economy forward by guaranteeing market operations, contributing goods and services for other businesses and for the people.
More than 4,000 private companies are operating in Cuba since the legal entities were approved in 2021 as part of previous economic measures. The new companies are expected to create tens of thousands of jobs.
Many Cubans believe there is a light at the end of a dark economic tunnel, but how fast it takes to get through it will depend on both internal and external obstacles. Luis Chirino, CGTN, Havana.
Another cabinet reshuffle in Peru. The embattled President Pedro Castillo is set to name a new prime minister, his fifth after assuming office just last year. The latest crisis was triggered by the resignation of his close ally. Castillo is the target of 5 criminal investigations. Though he can't be charged while in power, he denies all allegations of wrongdoing. Colombia and Venezuela are set to become a little friendlier as the new president in Colombia says he's prepared to repair relations. The countries will reopen their embassies for each other for the first time since 19. Mary Trini Mina reports from Caracas.
A little piece of Colombia in Caracas. That's how this restaurant advertises what it has to offer to customers. It's a place where Venezuelans and Colombians come to enjoy Colombian cuisine, like the bandeja paisa. A hearty dish usually made with pork, avocado, red beans and rice, and an egg. 13 years ago, Medellin-born Viviana Gomez came to Caracas in neighboring Venezuela, where she's put down roots and grown a business.
We've been separated for a long time, and I believe the opening should take place as soon as possible because we need to reestablish all kinds of relations with Colombia.
In 2019, diplomatic relations between Colombia and Venezuela were cut off when Colombia backed Venezuela's opposition leader Juan Guaidó in his bid to force out the socialist government of Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro.
Y soy su presidente.
Leftist Gustavo Petro was elected president of Colombia in June, and he pledged to make significant changes, welcomed by his counterpart in Venezuela.
Y Colombia y Venezuela nos reencontramos.
Colombia and Venezuela meet again, in peace, with love, in liberty, looking to the future.
Colombia and Venezuela plan to appoint new ambassadors shortly after Petro is sworn in, and to gradually open borders for commerce. Connecting flights closed in 2017, they're also expected to start up again. More than a decade ago, trade between Venezuela and Colombia exceeded $7 billion. Between January and April of this year, it was worth less than $145 million. Business groups say bilateral commerce could grow to $1.2 billion by the end of 2022, once trade is normalized.
It's a new chapter starting with a blank page ready to be written. We're looking at it with a lot of optimism, but with precaution as well.
At the Colombian restaurant in Caracas, customers are also hoping for the best.
There should never have been a breakup because Venezuela and Colombia are two brother countries.
And although it will take time to mend broken relations, many Venezuelans and Colombians are looking forward to the day when they will be able to sit at the same table again. Maritrini Mena, CGTN, Caracas.
Next up, time for some fun on Global Business. We're going to have a fantastic conversation with a rising Chinese tennis star.
Modern vitality, born of ancient civilizations. Asia exemplifies diversity in its best sense and welcomes changes at the fastest pace. Asia Today brings you the headlines from the most populous continent, puts in focus politics, economies, and faces, and takes you on a tour of the sights from the region and beyond.
Images may appear to be identical, but looks can be deceiving. The difference is not always obvious. It has to be discovered. There are always different sides to a story. We put the focus on the details. To see more, to understand better. CGTN. See the difference.
Welcome back. Quick recap now of today's top business headlines. More than 500,000 jobs were added to the U.S. economy in July, double of what was forecasted. Unemployment stays at 3.5%, equal to a 50-year low seen just before the pandemic. 3 more ships loaded with grain have left ports in Ukraine under a UN deal. The ships are carrying a total of 64,000 tons of corn, and they are headed to the UK, Ireland, and Turkey. And China's popular beach destination of Sanya is ramping up COVID measures. The resort city in Hainan is the latest coronavirus hotspot with 200 new cases confirmed just in the last 24 hours. Finally, we turn to the world of tennis. The City Open is taking place right now in Washington, D.C. It's the annual hard court tennis tournament that attracts big name players as well as rising stars. And I had a chance to check this out and catch up with rising 21-year-old Chinese player Wang Xiyu, who is currently ranked 95th on the women's tour.
So welcome to Washington, D.C. You know, this is a pre-U.S. Open tournament, but I don't want to take away from the fact that it's still a major tournament here in the U.S. I know you just got here a few days ago. What's it been like here in Washington, D.C.?
Well, it's my first time to being here, but I really see a lot of Chinese people here, and I'm really so happy to see a lot of Chinese people here. I'm being outside really long time, and I feel really, how to say, good and enjoy playing here. And even it's a little bit hot here, but I really like it, and everybody's so friendly, and it's really nice condition to play the tennis.
You know, you're a role model to a lot of young women and men all over China and Asia. You know, what advice do you have for them if they want to be a professional athlete someday?
Well, I'm playing like step by step, and just to see. I try my best and to see what can I reach, and just until now, well, there's nothing really special to be, because I'm still a normal person, you know, just trying my best to doing the thing.
Well, you might think you're a normal person, but I'm sure a lot of people view you as, you know, much more than normal as an athlete. What's the hardest part about being a professional athlete for you?
Well, you know, every day is not the same. Sometimes you will have a bad time. I think the professional is like when you have bad time, but you are still going through to this, like you are still keep fighting to yourself, to your opponent, and keep doing the same, try your best. It's difficult sometimes to keep doing same.
How do you keep yourself motivated to fight and get better and overcome these challenges?
Just trying to find the point that you will enjoy. Like, you know, when you have bad time, it's just so difficult to find the fun to keep going. But you have to trying to find a way to going through. There's no way going back, you know. So just going through.
And I'm happy to announce she is now officially in the quarterfinals. Another superstar, Sally Ihan, will be up next out of Washington with the world news. For everybody here in Washington, D.C., thanks for watching. You can check out our other editions of Global Business, as you can see there on the screen. Have a great weekend, everyone.